Are we coping with Great Britain being locked up?
Yes.
Just, I think.
Just about.
Nothing's really changed for me, to be honest. I'm an introvert as it is, so...
Yes. I think most of us are quietly introverts, even if we're strangely seeking extroversion. Wow, I used a big word. That was not the point of this podcast. That was definitely not the point of this show. Wow, a big word.
And you did that on a Sunday afternoon as well. Now
I did do that on a Sunday afternoon. Oh, now you've given away the fact that this is going out on a Wednesday and we record before. No, it doesn't matter. It's all fine. It's all very informal. Good evening, good morning, good night, depending on when you're listening to this, ladies and gentlemen. It's Jake Sanson here with Phil Kinch, Scott Woodwiss and Will Knight. All of us are panellists, journalists, commentators and motoring nutjobs. And we're here just having a good old bit of a chat as I take you round the bend. And, I've come up with a jingle. Do you want to hear the jingle?
Oh, I see the jingle.
Go on then.
This is the Round the Bend podcast with Jake Sanson.
You can't because it's post-production, so that's just a bit of a laugh for you. So everybody else heard it. You'll have to listen to the actual show to hear it. How funny am I? Oh dear. Anyway, this is so much more informal than any other sort of show that I've ever done. I felt that so much of this stuff is so professional done and so much of this is scripted. I don't want scripts. I want us to genuinely go in a weird direction and have some fun. There's not enough fun in the world of motoring broadcasts, so this is much more laid back. So I'm Jake Sanson. Every week I shall drive you round the bend, literally. And we've got some topics that we want to discuss. The first episode of this show is Rebels, Lunatics and Dreamers. And more should be revealed as to why we called it that a little later on. Our first topic of conversation, Lewis Hamilton, 7 times world champion, who we've been watching, well, most people have been watching him since about 2006, roughly, GP2. Some of us have been watching even longer than that. 1998 was the first time I saw Lewis Hamilton racing, sort of April, May time, and it was absolutely hammering it down with rain at Larkhall, Scotland. And that's when I first thought, ooh, this kid's a bit all right. I suppose the first question, and it's one of those mammoth questions that everybody asks about Lewis Hamilton, will go in the round. Phil Kinch, greatest racing driver of all time, yay or nay?
Nay.
Nay? Well, that was easy. Okay, on to the next one.
No hesitation.
No. Why not? Is it because people are better, or he just don't think he's all that?
I feel there are other drivers better qualified for that title who have worked harder potentially.
Harder potentially? Ooh. No,
Yes,
I'm afraid you're going to have to expand
hard.
on that viewpoint. I
will. So if you were to say who was I think is the greatest Formula One driver of all time, I would say Ayrton Senna. Because, and even though I wasn't a fan of Senna originally, I was a Mansell fan, always. The reason being is he just worked and worked and worked. Tolman obviously got him noticed. Lotus developed his abilities and his reputation. And as soon as he got to McLaren, he was at the high point of his career and just kept working at it. There was no change to him almost. His attacking, driving, always on the limit, always pushing. But at the same time, unlike other drivers in Formula One, he never had teammates pull over out of the way for him or do team orders. If he was going to overtake, for example, Gerhard Berger as his teammate, he was going to overtake him. That's that. His title battles with Prost, as always, it's me versus you, even though we're in the same team. So personally, I don't feel Lewis Hamilton is the greatest driver of all time. I recognise his 7 titles and how he's got to that and the wonderful work he's done with McLaren and Mercedes and what he's done to get there. But I feel other drivers are more befitting of that title. If you were to stay statistically the best driver of all time, then yes, because he's got every single record
yes
you can possibly have in the sport. So I would agree on that one, but not best driver of all time.
Interesting. That was a very eloquent argument. I liked that. Thank you. Good. Oh, goodness me, we've got intellectual. Will Knight, Lewis Hamilton, yay or nay, greatest of all time?
Nay.
Okay. Expand.
Well, 2 words really. Taki Inoue, he exists. So,
yes.
but
the obligatory Taki Inoue reference has made it in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You can't do a podcast without mentioning
was,
Taki Inoue.
I think I was 3 years old when Taki Inoue was in Formula One, so that's saying something. But in all seriousness, like growing up throughout my life, I've always been under the influence that Fernando Alonso has been the greatest driver of all time. I know that's extremely controversial to most people nowadays, based on the fact, obviously, he's back in F1, he did the young drivers test, and everyone started kicking off about that. But you can look at the other side and say, well, why do you love Kimi Räikkönen so much then if you don't want old drivers in the sport? But in my personal opinion, I think it was 2017 without the Honda engine failure, I didn't see much of the Indy 500 that race, but from what I know of it, he was in the lead, he was doing a good job, and without that Honda engine, he would have finished higher up than his previous two attempts.
Absolutely.
But the Le Mans, he's won it twice. He's won 2 Formula One World Championships, and I think I can't exactly remember the statistic. I think it's something like 5 more points over 3 seasons in his career, and he would have been a 5-time world champion. So that's my personal opinion. But then again, looking back on it, I do also have to say that there is an element of bias, in my opinion, because the first titles I remember were 2006 and 2007.
Yeah.
So, looking back on it, I've always had sort of the distinctive memory of Lewis Hamilton has always been 2007 at China, because that is my first ever memory of Formula One.
Fantastic. I mean, that's really interesting, because I think most people, genuinely, when it comes to motorsport, they tend to start their motorsport history at about the first year they got involved in motor racing. It's very hard for people to look back beyond what they remember as a kid, which is interesting, because for me, it's like year 1 is 1992. So it's very hard to go back and kind of think, oh yeah, I keep forgetting about Nelson Piquet. He was actually a 3-time world champion. Yeah, interesting. So it is hard to sort of be like retrospective when you're going off your childhood memory. So Alonso, it's a fair argument. I don't suppose Singapore 2008 clouds your judgment in any way? No, not at all?
It's, in my personal opinion, although I don't believe Alonso was completely unaware of what was going on, because any driver in that situation would realise what was going on. In my personal opinion, part of me thinks he should have been taken out of the race because of what Renault did, but then part of me thinks Flavio Briatore was always a bit of a conniving person.
I'm amazed you finished that sentence with the word person. I thought there was going to be something else coming there, but this is family-friendly show. Fair enough.
Got to keep it family-friendly, Jake.
Yeah, we'll keep it family-friendly. Absolutely. We'll keep it controversial, but we'll keep it family-friendly. Scott Woodwiss, same question. Lewis Hamilton, is he the greatest of all time, or is he a GOAT? I don't know why people use that word, GOAT. I mean, I know it's abbreviation, but nobody's a GOAT. Greatest of all time, yay or no?
For me personally, I wouldn't say he's the greatest of all time, but I recognise him as one of the greats. Right, if you look at his achievements, but also how he drives, he is up there with the likes of Senna, Schumacher, Prost. I put people like Fangio and Clark in there as well, Jackie Stewart, Sterling Moss, and a few others. I think for me, it was always, I used to read books, and I had videotapes of Nigel Mansell, so he was always a hero upon growing up.
Yes.
But then as I learnt more about Senna, and as I kind of learnt more about what he did and how he did things and who he was, more and more turned into my hero. So for me, I felt like he was someone who just he was one of the very few drivers, if not one of the only drivers out of maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing maybe 2 or 3 here, if not a couple more, that, to use a quote from Martin Brundle, he had a sixth sense of where the grip was before he turned into a corner. And he had this ability to, I think he was one of the first proper drivers. I don't know how in-depth people got in the 60s and the 70s and maybe the 80s before Senna came along. I know that Prost, to quote, can't remember who it was that said it, but I was listening to one of the race podcasts on their Bring Back V10 series, and someone said that Prost used to run his car like the CEO of a company. So basically, he used to run his car like that. But how in depth he went, I don't know in terms of feedback. But from what I knew, what I understood, Senna was the first one that would absolutely truly go into fine combing every single piece of data on every single corner, every single lap to find where he would go. He'd be so intricate in the way he described things. Now, I don't know how, for example, because I never heard, or maybe no one's put a camera into a briefing where Senna or Schumacher or something like that has been giving a debrief. But there is documentary footage and statements from people who are talking about when they went with Senna. I think there was one occasion when I think it was, I can't remember which circuit it was, but this is when he's back at Lotus. He had 2 or 3 of his engineers, and he kept them up until about, what was it? I think it must have been, I think it was like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, just going over and over and over the practice data to make sure there was nothing that they missed. It was so intricate and so fine. And I think he was also the first driver to properly focus on fitness, because people talk a lot about Michael Schumacher's commitment to fitness and his fitness levels and how he could outlast everyone. But I think Senna did it first, because there's lots of footage of him, working out and jogging on the beach and everything else. He was the first one, I think. So I think he pioneered quite a few things. And one thing I'll also say is, I think he was the first driver, let's say, my generation, for those who grew up in the late 80s, early 90s going forwards, who, if you talk about those who race now and who their main inspiration is, including Lewis Hamilton, their main inspiration was Ayrton Senna.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe going forwards, obviously people talk about Senna and Schumacher and Prost and others, but I think now going forwards, it's going to be interesting how the next generation, who've been growing up the last 5-10 years, and then grown up as Formula One fans, how many of them will tout Lewis as their hero, tout as the person they look to? Because I think, like Senna and Schumacher, they've defined the next generation, how they think about racing, how they think about driving a car, how they think about making an overtake or racecraft or giving feedback and giving setup. It'd be intriguing and I don't think we know just yet how that's going to rub off on this current generation coming through when they get into their late teens, early 20s in the next 10, 15 years' time, what legacy he's going to leave, because we know what kind of legacy those other drivers have left. And I think while Schumacher achieved a lot, I think that Senna was somebody who kind of was a first proper pioneer of showing people the kind of racecraft he put in, the levels of dedication and commitment that he put in. And obviously then Schumacher came along and then sort of had his own way of doing that.
I have an interesting argument. I think Formula One has been defined in the last few years by how much more reliable it's become. Because if you look back at sort of late 80s, early 90s, it was quite an achievement for Senna and Schumacher to win 8 to 9 races a year. That was a massive achievement, because that's half the races. And that was like, wow, they've actually won like 50% of all the races this year. That's pretty phenomenal. Now, like Schumacher and Hamilton, they have got to the habit, even Vettel, of winning like 75 to 80% of the races over the course of the year. And that's because the cars just don't break down anywhere near as much as they used to. They're pretty much bulletproof reliability a lot of the time. So if the reliability was the same as it was in the 80s and 90s, would these records have tumbled quite the same way that they did? I don't think they would have done. I think you'd have had a few more victories for people like Alesi, a few more victories for people like Fisichella, and maybe Sato might have picked up a Grand Prix victory if the cars were a bit more light. These sort of things. You don't really get many underdog victories. This year was very rare in the sense that Gasly and Perez both took a Grand Prix victory, and that was unusual. You used to get like 1 or 2 renegade victories a year for random drivers, and that just doesn't seem to happen very often these days. So I wonder if Hamilton and Schumacher's massive record-breaking streak would have happened in the 80s and early 90s. I don't think it would have done. I don't think they would have got the chance, because the engine would have kicked the bucket one too many times for them to get to that level.
No, I think you're onto a point, Jake, in the fact of, at the time, it was more driver ability before technological revolution.
Yeah.
So it was, can the driver get in the car? Can he drive the car around the circuit? Can he do 44 laps of Spa? Can he do 45 laps of Hockenheim as it was at the time? And is the car capable of doing it? And I think what you had was, again, I'll be honest, yes, I've watched Formula One since like the very early 1980s. And back then it was driver ability. If the car stayed in one piece and you got the points, all the better. And then you built up your championship challenge. But I think what happened was, towards the end of the 90s and into the 2000s, reliability became the big thing. It's right, we can now we've got the driver, we can put in the car to go and win the races. We need the car to stay in one piece, not just for one race, not just for 2 races, for as long as possible.
It's too expensive. The costs are out of control. We need to make something that never ever breaks.
Exactly, and that's when you get all the money being piled into development, and then you get regulations saying you may only use so many parts to an engine.
Yeah.
And I see your point on this, and I'll be honest, I agree. I think because cars are so reliable, and obviously in this day and age so technologically advanced compared to the 1980s, there is a massive difference. I think that's part of the reason now. Driver ability goes so far because drivers now not only just get in the car, drive them, they've got to have some sort of NASA space age qualification to be able to drive the damn things. But also, It's because it's so reliable. You've got so many cars out there, so it's harder to score points, and it's harder to find that 10th, 100th or 1,000th of a second that's going to move you, say, from the middle of the grid to the front of the grid, from the back of the grid to the middle of the grid. So it is very difficult. And I think, again, where Lewis excelled in one respect, obviously, as soon as he went to Mercedes, that was the golden ticket almost.
Yeah.
Mercedes turned up in Formula One in ready to have another go at it. And as soon as
but we were all laughing at them. We were saying that this is ridiculous. Why is Lewis going there? This is the worst decision of his career.
Yes, and I remember talking to people when I was fully immersed in Formula One at the time when this happened. It's like, why is he going to Mercedes? Why is he leaving McLaren? It's an established. What's he doing? It's like he knows something the rest of them don't.
Yeah.
He knows what they're looking at. They're all looking at the new engine regulations with the hybrid turbo era coming in, and if anything, that was the smartest move he's made. I think it's very rare for a driver to have driven for maybe one or two teams in their entire career tops. And I will be very surprised if Lewis Hamilton decides to leave Mercedes at any point before he decides he's retiring, I personally think. But we all said when Senna did this, no one will do this again. Schumacher came along, blew everybody out of the water. And when he retired, it's like, oh, no one will ever do this. Lewis comes along, blows everyone out of the water, equals titles and wins. So there will always be someone that comes along of a generation that beats the records and the statistics because they've got that talent.
Yeah.
And it's like Scott said, how many, as I grew up, I was a Mansell fan. Later on, you get Hill, you get Coulthard, Brundle was always there. And then Lewis comes along. How many kids nowadays are looking at Lewis Hamilton and going, I want to be him. He's my hero. And 20, 30 years down the line, whether they're involved in motorsport as a fan, as a driver, however, they're going to be sitting there going, Lewis Hamilton was my hero. He's the one that got me into this. So you can sort of see how it works. But on the point of reliability, because Formula One is so reliable now and the cars are virtually bulletproof, it's very difficult. So there's a lot more involved than it used to be when I was watching it as a younger fan.
I mean, it's interesting because as we record this, Lewis Hamilton has yet to confirm whether he's going to race for Mercedes in Formula One in 2021. I think we all kind of think he's going to, but it's just about ticking that last box as to how much more money he's going to make compared to last year now that he's a 7-time world champion. But it is fascinating that, we still have this conversation. Does he have to be the greatest of all time? Well, no, he can be the greatest of our generation. And I think he is the greatest of our generation. There's no really there's no two bones about it. In the 1950s, Fangio was the greatest. In the 1960s, probably Jim Clark. The 1970s is probably Niki Lauda. The 1980s, it's a toss-up between Senna, Prost or Piquet. The 90s, it's either got to be, it's pretty much either Senna or Schumacher, isn't it? It's one of those two, depending on your viewpoint. 2000s is a lot harder because you've got Schumacher and you've got Alonso and then you've got the best rookie of all time, Lewis Hamilton. And this generation, it's like, well, who's better, Vettel or Hamilton? It depends on which part of the decade you started in. So it is interesting. It is interesting how, we're kind of in this new decade now. We've had a dominant season again by Lewis, but is he going to be known and remembered as the greatest driver of our generation? Or is that going to go to somebody like Charles Leclerc or Lando Norris or George Russell? It's fascinating, isn't it? You don't really know which direction it's going to go in. I always like this sort of transitional period. And I think we are about to enter a transitional period of change in Formula One because you can't sustain dominance for that length of time.
I'm surprised you didn't say Max Verstappen there.
Oh yeah, Verstappen. Yeah, well, it's funny because the whole Verstappen thing. He came in as a rookie and won as an 18-year-old. But is he in the right team? I don't know if he is. I don't think they will. What do you think of this? What do you make of this?
No way is he in the right team. Verstappen is waiting for that Mercedes seat to become available. And in my opinion, once that Mercedes seat becomes available, when they inevitably kick out Bottas for underperforming, because I know being a journalist, you are supposed to be neutral.
Right.
But in no way is Bottas going to be in there for 2022. Russell is going to be in that seat. If Hamilton retires, who are they going to bring in? Ricciardo signed up to McLaren. Leclerc's bound to Ferrari. No way Ferrari are going to let him go.
No chance.
Verstappen, in my opinion, right now, until Lewis signs a contract, he has got a magnifying glass and he is looking at every single clause that he can get out of that team with. And then as soon as he is gone, And I do not believe that he will stay with Red Bull. As soon as he is gone, they will either have to bring in someone from the outside, like they did with Checo for 2020, or they'll have to promote Yuki Tsunoda early or bring in Alex Albon again. But the way I look at it, I can actually, because I just linking it back to the point earlier you guys made about Lewis Hamilton going to Mercedes. I actually had this discussion the other day with my girlfriend because she's not very not up to date. She isn't as knowledgeable on Formula One as we are.
Okay,
but she's trying to get into it. Like, she's trying to understand it, and she said, "Why did Hamilton go to Mercedes?" In my personal opinion, and this only subjective, I am on the side of Jenson Button. I saw an interview that he did. I think it was either 2014 or 15. With the scale of those developments, no teams knew how much each other would be dominating or going up. No one thought Ferrari was going to go that far down in 2014. No one thought Renault was going to go that far down in 2014. Hamilton did not know. He was frustrated with McLaren that the gearbox kept going or the hydraulics kept failing, wanting number one status over Button in the fact that Button was underperforming, but they were still equal status. He just got frustrated. Singapore, he just retired after leading the race. Vettel came through, won the race after that. Hamilton was frustrated, angry, called Niki Lauda, signed a contract.
Is that when you think he did it? Is that literally the linchpin moment, Singapore 2012? Yep. That's when he signed the contract?
I thought he was in talks with Niki Lauda. I thought he was aiming to go to Mercedes. He was definitely still conflicted. The team that brought him into Formula One, the team he won his world championship with, or this team who are offering him a new contract, so much money. And I think that is what we're going to see with Verstappen. He will not stay. I don't believe he will stay with Red Bull until that contract ends in 2022 or 2023, whenever it is.
I say you might sound a bit jokingly, but this is kind of reason number 3,856 of why I think most F1 fans are pretty fickle. And it's because, and it's an example, I can't remember which race it was, but I think it was under safety car. And it might have been Hungary. I can't remember which one it was. Whenever Lewis Hamilton decides to complain about something on the radio, for example, like his tyres aren't working, or in this case,
you mean like every 27 seconds? Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. That's all right.
Well, in some cases, but this is more. It wasn't this time. It wasn't about his tyres, believe it or not. It was about the safety car. He was complaining that the safety car was going too slow, and everyone was kind of like on social media going, "Oh, for goodness sake, Lewis, stop complaining." But then as soon as Max Verstappen does it, says, "Oh, come on, mate, the safety car's going too slowly," everyone else goes, "I agree, it's going too slowly." It's like,
absolutely right.
That's literally what Lewis said about 5 seconds ago, and it seems as though that, and this is, I get where some people don't like it because sometimes, Lewis doesn't complain, but that's in the same vein that, even though we probably don't have access to their team radios, who's to say that people like Senna didn't complain on the radio, like Schumacher didn't complain on the radio, like
they all did.
Alonso at times complained on the radio, but it seems to be for some reason that whenever Hamilton does it, maybe because he's more in front in the lead and therefore his team radio maybe is more broadcast than others, then it comes, they hear it more often, and therefore some people seem to ridicule him more for it. I just thought it was interesting how
this is. I figured out what this is, Scott. I know what you mean about the whole fickle thing, but I figured out exactly what it is. It's the dominance factor. Nobody likes the dominance factor. Do you remember when Vettel was dominating in the Red Bull and everybody was like, "Oh, shut up, Sebastian, you're winging all the time, so, you haven't got a voice to complain about these things." Then he stopped winning for about 2 or 3 years, and the second he started winning for Ferrari, he became everybody's favourite racing driver overnight. Isn't that amazing? Just suddenly, everybody hated him when he was at Red Bull because he was winning every race, and then he went to Ferrari, started winning, and all of a sudden, he's Mr. Likeable. Isn't that nobody likes anybody who's dominant? Nobody. When Michael Schumacher was romping to every victory at Ferrari, everybody hated him. They absolutely hated him. It was like, "Oh, we wish we just have Coulthard win a race or Hakkinen or something." And then the second Alonso started winning, it was like, "Oh, Schumacher, come on, Michael. It's the dominance factor. Nobody likes to see anybody dominant. What we want is a straight fight between 3 drivers, all going down to the last round of the championship. That's what we want every single time. If anybody breaks away and is dominant, that person is hated. And unfortunately, Hamilton and Rosberg, they were hated from 2014 to 2016 because it's like they were winning everything. But then only the hardcore fans were really intrigued by their rivalry. Everybody else was like, "Oh, well, Mercedes wins every time, so what's the point?" And it's the dominance factor. Nobody likes the dominance factor.
I will admit, and I can laugh about it now, I will admit that in that period when he was dominant, kind of like end of 2001, let's say 2002, so kind of like 2004, I will admit there was more than one afternoon where I would start watching the beginning of the Grand Prix and then fall asleep. And then actually come towards the last bit and find that Schumacher's still leading. And that's why in many cases where, if you ask me about what happened in certain Grand Prix in 2002 is different because I've watched the review video of that
the
like
2012,
1,100 times. Right? But it's 2003, 2004, if you ask me about certain events on those, I'm like, I don't know, because I fell asleep at most of the races.
I actually have a great nugget about that one. I was watching the Monaco Grand Prix in the year 2000. It was one where Schumacher was leading by a good half a minute, and I fell asleep on the sofa. And I woke up with 2 laps to go, and Coulthard was leading. I was like, hey, hang on a minute. What happened there? Schumacher was billions of miles out in front. What's going on? And it's the race that's got away from me to this day. The Monaco 2000 Grand Prix has completely gone away from me. I want to keep this conversation going, but I'm nowhere limited for time because I've got other topics I want to go for. We will be back in just a moment after these short messages.
This is the Round the Bend podcast with Jake Sanson.
And we're back, and it's time for the news. Now, this is the news with a difference, because the news encompasses so many different things, and you don't want to listen to the news that we've all been listening to for the last 6 months, with the C word and the B word and the G word, all of those sort of things. No, we're not getting involved in any of those things. It's automotive and motorsporty news. So straight into the news we go. Did you know that the future Alfa Romeo Giulietta is going to be based on a Peugeot 308? That's a bad marketing move, don't you think? It's a terrible idea. I mean, I love this whole Alfa Romeo PSN link-up, and that's fine, you know. If you hadn't heard about this, then yes, there is going to be a sort of a alliance now with PSA, which of course is the group that runs Citroën and Peugeot, but apparently Alfa Romeo is now involved in that. Were you aware of this? I wasn't aware of this. But yeah, apparently the Alfa Romeo is part of that new group, and they're going to build the new Alfa Romeo Giulietta on the same platform as the future Peugeot 308. I think that's just become the least desirable Alfa Romeo of all time. I genuinely don't want anything that is an Alfa Romeo that's like a Peugeot. The reason you go for an Alfa Romeo is because you don't want a Peugeot. That's a terrible, terrible thought.
But I think it's interesting how these days, when it comes to car manufacturers, there's hardly any, when you look at sort of mainstream car manufacturers, there's hardly any, if not, I can't really think of one, Jamie, off the top of my head, that isn't owned by a bigger parent company.
That's so true.
Yeah.
But before, it was the days when, all right, you know, Vauxhall, all right, fair enough, it's part of General Motors, so it was their arm anyway, but now, I mean, Vauxhall is owned by PSA now. Yes. So any information they've got, any car parts they have, it's basically now Peugeot and Citroën-based parts. And it's kind of, these days, we're in this generation
I thought there was still GM. I didn't realise that Vauxhall had been bought by PSA. Oh, there you go.
I think they got bought by PSA, and also I don't know if the whole closing of Holden was related to that, or if it was just sales. I think it might have just been sales over in Australia. But it seems as though now we're in this kind of we've been in this current period for several years now, where there seems to be a big sort of collection of, let's say, 4 or 5, let's say, automotive conglomerates, where it's one overseeing mother brand, shall we say, that owns about 7 or 8 different automotive brands. You know, like the Volkswagen Audi group owns Porsche, happens to own, if I've got to get this right now, it owns Porsche and it owns Lamborghini and it owns a couple of, like, Bentley and Bugatti and a few others. You know, I mean, like Fiat owns Ferrari and Alfa Romeo, etc. Ford owns, I don't know who Ford owns these days now. I think they still own Mazda, if not a couple of others. And there's other ones that move that go on, and you know, Toyota and Subaru work together, and there's a few others in the mix as well.
Well, this is a fascinating thing. I want to bring this up because now that we've got into the topic of car groups, I made a list about 8 years ago, to the day almost, of the car groups and who they own and who owns them, essentially. Now, I wonder how much of this has changed in the last 9 years. So this is interesting. This was back in 2012. The car groups that are active, Renault and Nissan, they had an alliance in 2012. I think they're still together. Renault, Nissan, Infiniti, Dacia and Lada were all part of the Encompass group. I'm not sure if they're all still together. I know Renault still owns Dacia. I don't know about Nissan. Are they still together? Are they still friends?
I believe they are still together.
Okay, that's fine. Daimler-Benz, they obviously had, Daimler was the parent group, and they have Mercedes-Benz, Maybach, which is the tuning specialist, and Smart. And I'm fairly sure that's all there is with that particular company. That's fine.
Now, my understanding on that one is that Daimler and Benz have gone their separate ways since
Oh, okay. They've had a split.
So
Yeah, isn't it Daimler Chrysler? It's Daimler Chrysler now.
Daimler
Chrysler. Okay, Barbie and Ken aren't together
Chrysler,
anymore. Fair enough.
Which also, to feed into that one, the Daimler Chrysler also have shares in Fiat, which now are part of PSA.
Oh,
so
right. So hang on a minute. What you're saying is that now there's like a foursome going on. We've got Daimler, Chrysler, Fiat, PSA, Peugeot, Citroën. Oh, that's just wrong.
Yes, an Uber group of manufacturers.
Do you know what? People's keys are going to get confused at this wife swapping do. It's not good. It's not sensible. Someone's got to get in and sort that out. General Motors were made up of Oldsmobile, but I'm fairly sure they've now gone bust. Pontiac, Hummer, Saturn, Buick, Cadillac, GMC, obviously. Holden, which we also think have now gone bust. Vauxhall, which you're saying has now gone to PSA. Opel, I'm guessing, have they gone the same way? Because that's basically a Vauxhall.
They're the same.
Yeah. Chevrolet
it's a Vauxhall,
and Bertoni. Yeah. Does anybody own a Bertoni? Anybody? And I'm not talking about Forza Motorsport. Does anybody actually own a Bertoni? I don't think anybody actually does.
I don't think it's so much the Bertoni cars. I think they probably own the Bertoni design house.
Yeah,
so
it's design house, isn't it? The Ford Motor Company. This is back in 2012, so a lot has changed since then. Ford, Mazda. I don't think they're together anymore.
No.
Aston Martin. They're definitely not together anymore.
No.
Lincoln and Mercury. Not sure about Lincoln and Mercury.
I believe they still have both of those.
Oh, bless.
They still have shares in them in some way, shape or form.
So Ford have Lincoln and Mercury, and that's about it. Oh, bless them. Anyway, Tata Motors, they had Jaguar and Land Rover, as well as obviously Tata. Is that still the same, or Jaguar and Land Rover?
They still have them.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
The Zhejiang Geely Motors Group. Nobody had heard of a Geely in 2012, but they owned Volvo. Do they still own Volvo? Is Volvo still going?
They do.
Okay.
They do. They also own Lincoln Co., Lotus, and Proton. Yes, they own Lotus.
Blimey. Okay. I thought it was some Malaysian chap who genuinely thought they could build 13 models in 1 year.
On that front, I saw something, I think it was yesterday, which I think was quite alarming, which suggested potentially that... because Aston Martin's recently just been bought by, more recent, as recently as however long it was bought by Lawrence Stroll.
Everybody's favourite Formula One dad. Yes, go on, crack on.
Yeah. I saw something which, I don't know if it's just wild speculation or rumour or if there's any truth to it, but I saw something which suggested that maybe Aston Martin may be up for sale again.
Oh, for goodness sake.
It might be some kind of a conglomerate which includes Geely.
Look, I'll buy it. It's no problem at all. I'll have it.
Can I just say something on the Lawrence Stroll thing?
Yes.
Like you just said, in all fairness, I know absolutely nothing about car companies. I'm not a car guy, I'm a racing guy. I wouldn't be able to tell you what the best Nissan is. I'd be able to tell you what good Formula One car is.
Everybody knows it's the Nissan Sunny.
Never heard of it, by the way.
Said nobody ever. Said nobody ever.
So, yeah, I think that shows the extent of I absolutely love Lawrence Stroll, personally. Yeah. And I know that is a very, very controversial thing to say. Obviously, people like on Instagram calling him Daddy Stroll whenever he buys something. In my personal opinion, let's face it, would we rather have Lawrence Stroll owning Racing Point and having Lance Stroll in that, or Rich Energy, who, let's face it, would have gone
I'd rather have Lawrence Stroll every single day.
You could have Dimitri Mazepin, and I don't
Lawrence Stroll. Yeah, Stroll.
And then, plus, Lawrence Stroll came in, bought Aston Martin. I know we've just mentioned it might be up for sale again, but that means that Lawrence Stroll has not only saved the Formula One car, has put more funding into a car company, but is also putting the two together to bring Aston Martin back to Formula One.
Very true.
What a guy. I know, obviously, one of the seats now is being gone to some rich Canadian, but Williams have gone into that, and everyone loves Williams. So, But either way, in my personal opinion, if you were to look at it, Lawrence Stroll is actually one of the best people in Formula One right now. He's a good guy at the end of the day. And
I would say that Lawrence Stroll and Zach Brown are two peas from the same pod. Would you not say?
Exactly. If you had the money, if you had however billions of dollars, if you had the money and your child wanted to go into racing, you would give them a seat. You would buy them a seat.
Of course you would. Yeah.
Everyone's saying, why is he doing it? Why is he doing that? That is his son. He is helping his son's dream. And in the meanwhile, he is helping the Formula One teams and the economy get back on its feet.
Formula One. The real drivers don't get the seat. Since 1950, Formula One has been about pay drivers who can afford to go racing. Shut up. Go to bed. Anyway.
Just to add that we are currently reviewing Will's contract at Downforce.
Yes, we are indeed. Yeah, absolutely. But it's fine. It's under
Anyway, I probably shouldn't go against Jake's comments considering he's technically my boss. But
moving on.
That's in the contract too.
Yeah, absolutely. The Fiat Chrysler Group, is it still a thing? Fiat Chrysler? You were just saying it kind of is, sort of. Okay.
So it's Fiat, Daimler, Chrysler with PSA. It's the fourth largest group in the world currently, as I understand it.
Makes sense. Well, back in 2012, it was Fiat, Ferrari, Maserati, which is now definitely not part of the Fiat Chrysler Group anymore. That's now part of the VAG Group. Abarth, Alfa Romeo, which they're obviously now still technically part of all that because of the PSA thing. Lancia, which I'm fairly sure doesn't exist anymore. Chrysler, AMC, Eagle, Plymouth, Dodge, and Jeep. So they've actually got quite a fair, decent...
There is a number of brands.
There is a lot of brands there. Then we go to the VAG Group, the Volkswagen Audi Group. Are you ready? Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, Bentley, Skoda, Bugatti, Lamborghini, Maserati, Seat, Ducati, MAN, Scania. I mean, what haven't they got in their automotive group? Seriously, they got loads of stuff within the VAG Group.
And that's still the same case as well. I think they've still got the same number of brands, except what they've recently done as early as this year was announce that there's no Volkswagen Motorsports, all the brain trust that was working there. They've been moved into Volkswagen, I'm going to call it home branding as such, building the road cars. And it looks as though potentially Audi's going a different way. So Volkswagen, it seems, will become the road car brand, and Audi will be the almost sport brand as far as the VAG Group's concerned.
Okay. That does make some sense, actually, marketing-wise.
Yeah. And then you've also got as well a Seat, so they've also had their own sporting brand, which is Cupra, which got launched 3 years ago, for their performance on-road brand and also their motorsport brand.
For the Iberian wing of VAG, obviously. Yeah.
And the laugh of it is that if you've bought some form, and here is my particular corner of the motorsport market, if you have been a customer of the VAG Group by being a TCR customer and buying one of their cars, if you bought an Audi, a Volkswagen or a Seat, I guarantee you that car has been built in Spain exclusively by Cupra, what was Seat Sport or Cupra, because they are the ones who build it all. It's all done by them.
That's interesting.
And the parts are interchangeable between all three platforms to a point as well. So I think they whilst they haven't expanded, obviously because of a lot of the fuel allegations that they've suffered over recent years, but that's how it seems to be. Volkswagen road brand, Audi sport brand, and I think there are also a lot of them are working towards the electric side of things. So, and because of the electric coming forward, I think again we'll see a lot of changes within the automotive industry there as well.
Interesting. We've got the Honda Motor Company, which just has Honda and Acura. Am I saying that right? I'm very, very...
that's Acura. Yeah,
Acura, okay. The BMW AG, which is just 3 brands from what I believe. BMW, Mini and Rolls-Royce, which is quite funny because that genuinely does prove that Mini and Rolls-Royce are no longer British companies. The Hyundai Motor Group is Hyundai and Kia. So 2 of the biggest brand names in the UK right now are together, which is massive. The Toyota Motor Group is obviously still Toyota, Lexus, and Scion. That's the one that everybody will go, what's a Scion? It's basically a posh Lexus. Proton Group. Now, the Proton Group is interesting because they were on their own, Proton and Lotus, but now they're not part of...
Both of those are with Geely.
Yeah, both of those are with Geely.
Under the Geely
did you know
umbrella.
that Lotus is actually working on a new entry-level sports car? Did you know that?
Yes.
They are. But it's only for Americans. It's only for the American market.
Because only Americans apparently need them.
Yeah, apparently the Americans need a new Lotus. Cheers, Geely. The Swedish automobile MV. This is an interesting one. I don't think this exists anymore, the Swedish automobile MV, because they had Spiker and Saab, and I'm fairly sure both of those are now dead in the water, aren't they?
Yes.
It's a shame because I see a lot of Saab 9.5 Aeros on the road and I just think, I want that car, but there's no point buying one. The
Saab at one point were actually going to be bought out by Vauxhall.
They
if you're
were.
very, very lucky enough, you'll see a Vauxhall Insignia that also looks like a Saab 9.5.
Ooh.
I guarantee you, I've seen 2 in Northampton. That's how sad I am.
Okay. I'll have a look for that the next time I'm playing Yellow Car. I will keep an eye out for a Saab. Yeah, absolutely. But there were a lot of independent marques in 2012. I'm interested to see whether these are still around. Di Tommaso. I'm fairly sure that's now defunct. DeLorean. They had a rebrand but I think they're now dead as well. They tried to come back and it didn't work. Devon. Has anybody got a Devon? Has anybody ever driven a Devon? I don't think so.
I live in Devon.
You live in Devon?
There was something called a Devon GTX, which I think was like a front-engine Viper type thing with a V10. It didn't work.
Interesting. The Gumpert, which is now no longer a Gumpert. I think that's owned by somebody else now. It's not called a Gumpert anymore. The Joss, which was an Australian supercar, which definitely doesn't exist anymore. McLaren. They got bought recently, but I don't think that was by a car group. That was by a bunch of investors, and that's going to stay as the McLaren, basically. The Koenigsegg, they're mental. They're absolutely mental. They'll never make a racing car, ever.
The car that killed the Stig.
That killed the Stig.
Tried to kill the Stig.
It did. Morgan are still going strong. How are they still going strong? How are they still going?
Now, Jake, I can give you an update on that.
Oh, really?
Yes, Romeo Ferraris, who run the TCR Alfa Romeo efforts, own Morgan as of January this year.
They've just bought Morgan. Go and get a Morgan, ladies and gentlemen, because it's actually TCR based now. Go get it. Go get a Morgan.
It's now, so Romeo Ferraris confirmed they've bought the Morgan brand. They will be building Morgans at their base in Italy. And it survives. And to be honest, Romeo Ferraris are actually a decent cartoon in general, outside of their motorsport activity. So
am I right in thinking that Romeo Ferraris is currently run by Michela Cerruti? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
There you go. Very competitive female racing driver. And now she runs Romeo Ferraris that owns Morgan.
Yes. Can you imagine an Italian Morgan?
Oh, yes, I can. Yeah, I totally can imagine an Italian Morgan.
Does that mean they have to stop using wood chassis now?
Yeah, well, no, it's just that the wood will catch fire every 17 seconds. That's how you'll know it's an Italian Morgan. Mosler. They're still going. They're still making things, are they? Are they? Possibly?
I believe so.
I think so.
Haven't seen anything from Mosler since about 1945. Noble, they're still going. They built that beautiful convertible version of the M600, which I've been in. And that's pretty spectacular. The Pagani. Are Pagani still building things? Have they made all the Zondas there are in the world now?
I think they still are.
Yes. Oh, our good friend, Marcus Johansson, who is tuning in and listening to us while we record this, he's told us that Saab was owned by General Motors between 1990 and 2010. It's not anymore, and it's dead. And Spiker folded this year in January. So Spiker have actually folded. There you go. Radical, they're still making race cars and no road cars at all, or are they making a road? They don't make road cars, do they, Radical?
I think it's just track day cars now. It's just track day cars, yeah. Panos. Now, I know rather sadly Don Panos rather sadly passed away recently, but I don't know whether the car company is still going. Is that still a thing? I don't believe it is.
No,
I believe that came to a close. I'll do some
Saline, they're not going anymore. I know that for a fact. Saline aren't going. RUF is still RUF. It's still the tuning company for Porsches. RUF. It's a very rough car.
No, I think it's Roof.
Oh, it's Roof. There you go. See, I was pronouncing it wrong all along. Rossian. Are they still making a car? The only thing I know about Rossian is they had a car on Forza Motorsport. That's literally the extent of my knowledge. Shelby. Are they owned by anybody? I think they're just still going it alone in the same traditional sense.
I figured that Shelby would maybe had some affiliation or some link. I know because they take Mustangs and stuff, but so they were sort of incorporated into Ford somehow. Maybe I got that wrong.
Could well be. SSC. Do you remember they were bragging years ago they had made the fastest car in the world, and then they just disappeared off the face of the planet? The SSC with their Aero.
They obviously built that car and disappeared off the face of the planet then.
I think
no, they didn't. In fact, there was a new car they built called the Tuatara, and apparently it has just, even though I found this a couple of days ago, apparently it has now become the fastest production car in the world, so they are still going.
There you go, the Tuatara. Wow. Well, it's better than an Aero, otherwise you can't accidentally let it melt in your handbag.
It's spelled Tuatara, Tuatara.
Ta-ta! Anyway, Spader. Is that
that weird boxy-looking thing called the Coda Tronca?
It is, yeah. I think that's the car you drive to the beach. You know, you play with your bucket and a spader. Anyway, I had to go there. Suzuki. Now, they're still making both cars and bikes. So fair play to them.
Oh, yeah.
Suzuki is still going it alone. So good for them.
I can add an interesting fact to Suzuki. At some point during the 2000s, if you owned a Vauxhall, it's quite possible you also were driving a Vauxhall with parts from Suzuki in it.
That doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
Apparently from what I've seen, apparently the new Suzuki Jimny is quite a good car. From what I've seen of people.
I'm sorry, I can't get over the fact it's called a Jimny.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Suzuki Jimny. It's like a Nissan Sunny. It has no right to call itself what it's decided to call itself. It's wonderful. I'm interested in the TVR thing because they were making a comeback, weren't they?
They were. They
They
were.
still are.
Still trying to make a
Yeah.
comeback? Okay.
A lot
Yeah,
of
they've
that
just
can't-
secured. They've just secured a £2 million loan from the government, and apparently they're going to start production of a new Griffith next year.
It's also the reason why, if you are a sports car fan, you've watched World Endurance Championship or Le Mans, you would have seen why the Rebellion cars were
Has got
sponsored
TVRs
by
all
TVR
over it.
as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely.
That was a whole part of them reinventing themselves and getting their name back out there and getting that
Interesting.
interest, because they know car maker equals motorsport equals, oh, look, people, look at us.
I'd quite like them
Definitely.
to go motorsport again properly. Wouldn't you love to see a GT3 version of a Griffith? That'd be
Oh,
fantastic.
yes.
They did say originally when the TVR was relaunched, they did say in their plans that they wanted to go back to things like Le Mans and they wanted to have their own one make series again and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
Well,
that
we're
was
waiting.
that was like
We're
2 or
waiting.
3 years ago.
Come on, we're waiting. Bring it on, come on. Wiesmann. Are Wiesmann still making a car? I haven't heard much from them of late. And then there's some little car company called Tesla. I think they make one or two things. They're only the most...
I don't think they've gone far at all, have they? They've not
No,
really
they're only the most
upped
valuable
a few
car company in
cars.
the world right now. Anyway,
Next,
moving on.
next you would say when they've made a bloody truck and they've sent a car into space and all this
That's
kind of
very
crazy
true.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And
Unbelievable. I don't know. Anyway, the news, continuing on with the news, Mercedes apparently are trying to make a city car that's smaller than the A-Class. That's like a go-kart, is it? Is that what you want to make? Can't.
is that a one-person car with a roof?
Yeah, well, I think that's
Is it
already been
literally
made. It's
in?
called the Renault Twizy. Don't make a smaller car than
Exactly.
the A-Class. Don't do that, Mercedes. That's not what you're for. You're for luxury.
Just remember, I think it's in Tokyo. They actually do allow go-karts as legal on the street.
They do indeed,
You
yes.
never know. You never know.
You've got to love the Japanese for doing something we've all wanted and making it legal. Good for them.
Yes.
There is a new Jeep coming. There is a new Jeep coming. And do you know what it's going to be called? The Gladiator. I actually want one just because.
Such an American
Just
name.
because it's called the Gladiator. It's a plug-in hybrid, so nobody in America is going to buy it. But it's wonderful because it is a pickup truck called a Gladiator. In fact, it's the Gladiator 4XE. I've
does that
never
mean that
wanted
every
a
time
Jeep
you-
until that moment. I now want a Jeep.
If you buy one of these, does that guarantee that every time you unlock the car and the alarm turns off, all you hear is gladiators?
No.
Ready?
No, it means that the only people...
Contenders!
No,
Ready!
no, the only people allowed to buy them are people who are the husband to a murdered wife or a father to a slaughtered son. That's the only people who are allowed to buy them.
There we go. So, very good. Touche.
Only people are allowed to
Anyway,
buy them.
that's the end of this week's podcast.
Yes,
now,
indeed.
so-
That was a wasted hour.
And we're off to the air.
Oh, dear. Totally wasted hour. Now, there is a new startup in France called Simone. All French girls called Simone. Very, very lovely people. And apparently, they're going to revolutionise long-distance travel. Wait for this, right? So, basically, you get on the back of a truck with a comfortable cab while a driver takes care of putting your vehicle on a trailer. Then you can relax watching like a box set or something. And basically, it's going to drive your car down the motorway for you while you sit in the back of this like hybrid truck thing. Is that not like a coach?
Is that just being the equivalent of that being called getting towed and picked up by the AA?
It is exactly, yeah, that is exactly. They've basically made a
Only
luxury
difference is your
version of
car's
getting
helmet.
picked up by the AA.
If you want to take your car, but you can't be asked to drive it, then someone else can put it at the back of a truck. You can watch it going down the motorway.
That's absolutely bonkers. I mean,
They could,
I mean, what?
They could call this new startup project Vert Flag.
Vert flag. I quite like that, to be fair. Now, there is a new Jaguar C-Type coming out. Can I just say that again? JLR Classic are making a Jaguar C-Type. It's basically an online configurator. You can make a new road-going version of the Jaguar C-Type. It is genuinely a thing. So you can even have this in Ecuria Cos Blue if you want. You can properly go for it. James May is apparently going to get one. And that doesn't surprise me in the slightest, because that is exactly the kind of new car he would buy. That's
Why are we
like-
not surprised by that at all?
No, indeed.
Apparently, they're only going to make 8 of them, and they're going to cost £2 million each.
That is a heck of a lot of money, actually. Heck of a lot of money. Remember we were talking about Volvo? Apparently, Volvo said a while ago that they were going to give away $1 million worth of cars if there was a safety scored in the Super Bowl last year. Do you remember this mad claim from Volvo? This year they're going to double it. They're going to give away 2 million cars. That just $2 million worth of cars if there's a safety in the Super Bowl. This just says to me, Volvo are desperate to break the American market and they've run out of ideas. This is the only thing they can think of. Give away free cars at the Super Bowl. It's the only way to do it. It's the only way to break the American market. Oh, man. Bless them. Bless them. I love Volvos. You shouldn't be stooping to this level. You should be charging people full whack. But that
Just
is exactly
slap a cheeseburger on the hood. That'll get
Absolutely, yeah. Slap a cheeseburger in the middle of Colorado. That thing will cook. No problem at all. Absolutely fine. Now, BMW have gone insane. They have gone insane. No, genuinely. Hear me out on this. They have gone insane. Their new M8 Grand Coupe has 809 horsepower. That's a Grand Coupe. A Grand Coupe that has 809 horsepower. It's going to go over 200 miles an hour. It's an M8 Grand Coupe. And they're going to give this to people. 809 horsepower. This is like a luxury end BMW. Luxury end BMWs don't have more than about 350 brake horsepower. They're going to make one with 809 horsepower and let it loose on the streets of Great Britain to give to normal BMW drivers.
I can see the conversation now. I'm very sorry, officer. All I did was put it in second gear, and it suddenly felt like I made the jump to light speed. It's a BMW.
That's like getting a 50cc moped and shoving a V12 in it.
Yeah, it is a bit.
I did see someone actually. this is on a video I saw from the popular, let's say, influencer group that I like, the Cybermen. It's one of those videos where kind of, you got to spend like 10 grand on each other and they bought all these bad stuff. And one of them actually bought the other at last minute. He bought them a moped, right? All right. And there's two things which Jake will love with this. One is that effectively the engine had been tuned from 50cc. This is a moped, 50cc to 300cc, right? 300cc moped. And what Jake will like even more, and I'm not even kidding you, if you go back and watch the video, you'll find it. It was done up in effectively a Braun GP livery, and that is no word of a lie.
Even had the logo on it, didn't it, as well?
It did. Yeah. Had Braun GP, had Canon, had Virgin on it, all the whole lot. It's a 300cc moped.
There's nothing about that that's wrong. Wonderful. Now, Bugatti. Would you ever buy a Bugatti Chiron? Would you ever buy one?
If I could afford one.
If you could afford one.
If I had the money, actually, yes, I would.
Yes, you would. Okay, Phil, would you ever buy a Bugatti Chiron? He's thinking about it. Would Phil Kinch ever buy? Oh, he's disappeared for a moment. That's why. Hang on a moment. I was going
to whisper it so you get edit it out and just say.
Well, I tell you, no. We're going to leave all blemishes in. That's fine. All blemishes in. There's no editing in this show. Anyway, Bugatti Chiron. Yes, you would if you had the money. Right. Okay. Now.
Just rather buy a Ferrari, to be honest.
Now, before you mention anything to do with that, before you kind of say, yeah, I know, I would buy one, let me just point out the fuel consumption, because it has finally been calculated for the Bugatti Chiron, because it was always one of those things that they were like, well, we don't really know. We don't have an exact figure for it. So the Bugatti Chiron, the basic Bugatti Chiron, a low fuel consumption on the Bugatti Chiron, when it's at full guns, right? When it's at full guns, 6.5 miles to the gallon. That's it. 6.5 miles to the gallon when you're properly pushing it. For the best fuel consumption you can get out of a Bugatti Chiron. This is the absolute best you can get out of a Bugatti Chiron. Ready? 15.7. That's it. If you are cruising, 15.7 miles to the gallon is the best you can get out of a Chiron. That's it.
To be fair, I've heard supercars that have worse fuel consumption than my low ones.
Really?
I think I'm pretty confident that I think when Jerry Clarkson, when he was testing I think it was the Ford GT, like the Ford GT that was in the version that he bought, when he was properly ragging it around the track, I think his fuel consumption was something like 4 miles per gallon.
That's astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. The Ford Mustang. It is back in production in China, and it's called the Ford Mustang Mach-E. Has anybody seen this car?
Nope.
It's not a Ford Mustang. It's a SsangYong with a Mustang badge. It looks ridiculous. I mean, this is obviously, very, very pleasant for the environment and everything, but it's not a Ford Mustang. Just call it anything else. Don't lie to us. It's not a Mustang.
There is reasoning behind their thinking on this. And a lot of this is based upon the fact of using, which is something similar that Aston Martin are doing with the Lagonda brand,
Right.
which is using a brand name that's recognised globally to put weight behind its electric push.
Okay.
So there is a lot of talk that Ford will be going into potentially some sort of Formula E entry in the next few years' time when the regulations change again to further enhance how good and how fast you can go with an electric racing car. There's also a lot of interest as well from Ford in the new LMDH rules, which are basically encouraging manufacturers to go and race all around the world in a top class with hybrid engines. And Ford have said, yes, we want to do this. But in order to get that interest from Joe Public, they are using the Mustang name to push behind this electric manufacturing. So unfortunately, while the Mustang doesn't look great, I'll admit, because I love a Mustang, I think they're great cars, it doesn't look good. But the thinking behind it is if you use a brand name behind the electric push, people will go and buy it because they're going, I own a Mustang, and we won't tell our best mates it's an electric one.
Yeah, but that's a bit like saying, look, I'm going to buy a pizza, but I'm going to buy the one with broccoli on it. It's not the same thing, is it? It's not exactly. It's not a proper Mustang. Exactly.
Can I tell you something worse? Because apparently I've seen certain screenshots from Chevrolet.
Okay.
Is that apparently, and I hate to have to say this, but apparently look at some of it. Apparently some of these, the rumours are becoming more and more prominent. Is that apparently there is rumours that there is going to be an electric SUV version, and I hate myself having to say it, of the Corvette.
Oh, no, and no.
Yes.
Oh, dear Lord. Stop it, just come up with a new brand name. Stop cheapening something that's already glorious. Stop it. I'm very emotional about these things. Okay, let's end on a positive note. Let's end the news on a positive note rather than a negative. Would you ever buy a safety car?
Which one?
Now that's
series?
an intelligent question. Right there from Will Knight. That's an intelligent question. Would you ever buy a pace car? And he says, which one? Phil, would you?
If it was something to do with IndyCar and I had the money, yes, happily.
Okay. Scott, would you buy one?
I think if I was to possibly have one for purposes of fun that wasn't on the roads, then I don't see why not.
Okay. Well, you can go and buy one right now. There is a official pace car from the Daytona 500 on eBay right now. By the time this goes out, it will have probably gone, or it might not have actually met its reserve, but there is a Pontiac 1988 Pontiac Grand Prix that was used as the official pace car in the Daytona 500 1988. It's currently on eBay Motors. A couple of days ago, the bidding was about $4,000. The reserve is actually unknown, but it hasn't met the reserve at that point. It's probably been listed by a classic car dealership in Pennsylvania for about $18,500. So if you're willing to part company with that much money and pick yourself up an actual, genuine Daytona 500 NASCAR pace car, which is of course road legal, then go for it. Go to eBay Motors and go find it. It's genuinely there.
Is that like how someone stuck the presidential podium on eBay after the whole raid on America and stuff like that? Because they got a lot of money for that.
You've put two and two together there very craftily. I like that. That's a very good theory. Quite possibly that is exactly how that happened. Dear oh dear. Yeah, so you can buy a NASCAR pace car. Tesla is still the most valuable company in the world, and BMW are giving 800 horsepower cars to nutters. That is basically what we learned from the news this week. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a moment after these short messages.
This is the Round the Bend podcast with Jake Sanson.
Part 3 of the first ever episode of Round the Bend is starting. Wait for it. Now. That's it, now. So we're going to talk about a motor racing movie, because that's kind of my thing. It's very much a hobby of mine. I collect movies with motorsport and cars in them. So we will do some to do with cars, some to do with motorsport. And the reason that this podcast is called Rebels, Lunatics and Dreamers is our subject for the first episode is the movie Rush. Now, obviously, for those who have seen the movie, you will know, obviously, that it's about the rivalry in 1976 between F1 drivers James Hunt and Niki Lauda. It has the greatest casting in any biopic I think I've ever seen in any form of movie anywhere ever. How on earth did they pick Daniel Brühl for Niki Lauda? He genuinely is Niki Lauda. There are points in the movie where I forget it's a movie, and I am actually watching Niki Lauda. So incredible, the acting from Daniel Brühl. And yeah, Absolutely his doppelganger. I'm going to read some interesting facts about it. Did you know that Sterling Moss is in the movie? Sterling Moss is in there. Well, not the actor Sterling Moss. The character Sterling Moss is in the movie of Rush. And did you know that Sterling Moss is actually being portrayed by Alistair Petrie, who is the fabulous headmaster from Sex Education on Netflix? It's absolutely true. Didn't realise that was him because he's basically the television presenter that speaks to the camera. At no point at all do they mention that he's Sterling Moss. That's one of those little Easter eggs in the credits. You have to know for a fact that he's actually meant to be playing Sterling Moss. I didn't know that at all.
He was the interviewer as well in that interview with James Hunt, the one like,
yes.
How do you go so incredibly fast?
Big balls. Of course, those who know realise that that's Sterling Moss, but those who didn't will probably go, oh, he's just talking to the television presenter. But that is actually meant to be Sterling Moss that he's playing. So there you go. Interestingly, there is a massive goof in Rush. And this is the kind of thing. You're gonna go to a serious podcast if you want a decent review of the movie Rush. That's fine. You go for that. Did you know that there is a massive goof in Rush in the sense that they're all wearing OMP race suits, but they're wearing the new OMP logo, which was designed in 2012. And they did that because OMP wanted to market their new brand of race suits. And they went, we'll put our new logo on. Surely they would have put the logo on from the 1970s. That would have made a little bit more sense. I'm just putting it out there.
It's cinema. We all love this sort of thing.
Like how there was like the dude in jeans in Indiana Jones.
This is very true. Yeah, the dude in jeans. I mean, there are loads of topical errors. I mean, for the fact that, most of Rush is filmed around Cadwell Park, Alton Park, Brands Hatch and Snetterton, and Donington Park as well, actually. So, yeah, fascinating trying to get away with the fact that Fuji is being filmed at Donington Park. That was a good effort. Good for you. James Hunt was obviously at one point wearing a Franklin and Marshall tennis shirt. I mean, those weren't invented until 1999, but hey, that's fine. No problem. Not a problem. And obviously when he's on the flight, and he notices that rather attractive flight attendant. He's obviously in a Lufthansa first-class seats, and they weren't introduced until 2001. But hey, we'll overlook that. That's fine. We'll overlook it. Not a problem.
Just to put it out there, Jake, in that scene that you just mentioned with the seats and the air hostess, I don't think many people were paying attention to
No, they probably weren't. I was being a particular nerd on that occasion. That's very true. No. Also, at the F3 race at Crystal Palace, did anybody spot the Renault 5? That, appeared on the scene like 3 years early. 3 years early. Yeah. Oh, well, never mind. It's fascinating because if you look at some of the cars that are lined up in Watkins Glen, how on earth did they get a British registered Ford Cortina to Watkins Glen in the 1970s? Fair play to them. That's very impressive. When Niki Lauda first tests the Ferrari at, inverted commas, Fiorano.
Which is actually Brands Hatch.
He's driving the 312B3. Not actually the 1973 car, which he should have been. He's driving the 74 car. It's worth noting that. That's wrong. Because the 1974 car would not have been a shitbox, biggest piece of crap I've ever seen. It would not have been one of those. It would have been a actually good Ferrari. Because he helped make it into a good Ferrari. So, again, slightly incorrect there. Slightly incorrect, Rush. But who says the most important line in the whole movie?
Isn't it Harold Ertel, which is played by Rob Austin?
It is, yes. Rob Austin, British touring car driver. He says the most important line in the whole film. And does anybody know the line?
I think it's maybe he's scared, isn't it?
Yeah, he just says maybe he's frightened. He says it over the top of the drivers' conference, and it changes the whole dynamic of the movie at that point. Rob Austin's words just creep over the top of the drivers' chat. Maybe he's frightened. And it just stops the room, and it makes Nicky very, very angry, and it probably leads to the accident. That's how they play it in the movie. But yeah, the most important scene in the whole movie is spoken by Rob Austin, the most important line. And he told me that himself. At the end of the movie, Hunt is getting ready to board an aircraft. Does anybody know what that aircraft is? I'm being nerdy again.
I don't, I'll be honest.
That's an HS-125. Now, interestingly, an HS-125... has a certain registration to it, if you know anything about air travel, and that registration was GIFTE. Now, that particular HS-125 wasn't registered as GIFTE until 1996. So, another big faux pas there. And also, Lauda's Learjet, the one that you see, Lauda's Learjet, the DCTRI, that wasn't built for another 4 years. So, there's quite a few things that they take liberties with in
So
in
can
Rush.
I just check, the next time we do some sort of downforce watch along when we watch
Yes.
Russ. Someone else is doing this because I can see everyone jumping out of the chat as you point out every single. Sanson, shut up! I'm trying to watch the movie. I'm crying out loud.
I promise I'm not going to do this with every movie we talk about. However, with Rush, because it's a biopic and everybody bangs on and on about what's wrong with it, I thought I'd just take it to this worst level. Yeah.
I could see it now. If we ever do this on a watch, you're not invited.
I'm not
someone
invited.
Else is sharing
You
this
see,
trip.
but this is the thing. This is the thing. People mock this movie so much for how wrong it is. Shut up and enjoy it. It's Rush. It's Hunt versus Lauder. It's a wonderful movie. Who cares that they actually lived in the same apartment for 4 years as best mates? That wouldn't have made a great movie. It's a brilliant movie that they hate each other. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it would have made a good sitcom, though.
It would have made a great sitcom, actually. Hunt and Lauder in the same flat.
Nicky Lauder trying to revise for his exams, and James Hunt keeps on bringing girls back to the
Will you keep that canary quiet?
I kid you not, there is a pilot in development right now, and there are at least 5 series being signed for James and Nikki in an apartment together.
That canary smells! Get it out of the kitchen! Oh, that would just be fantastic. I would watch that, Joe.
Why your accent turn from Nicky Lauder to Arnold Schwarzenegger?
It has got a bit Schwarzenegger, hasn't it? The other famous Austrian in the movies. Oh dear, I'm so sorry. How have I done that? But yeah, that would be the catchphrase. That would be Nicky Lauder's catchphrase all the way through that sitcom. Get that canary out of here! That'd be fantastic. That'd be amazing.
I'm going to have to play that quote back later.
Yes.
Did you know that Chris Hemsworth obviously was doing the Avengers while he was doing Rush? So he had to lose 14 kilos to pull off the authenticity of playing James Hunt, because he actually originally weighed 98 kilos because he bulked up for Thor, but he had to lose another 14 just to get the part right for James Hunt. That's incredible commitment, isn't it? To lose that much weight just for the purposes of playing a movie. I mean, people go, it's just acting. It's just, it's a lot of hard work. It's a massive amount of hard work.
That reminds me of Christian Bale, because he's one of those actors, and it seems to almost be a virtual prerequisite in the last sort of 10 years for actors in the movie business to be able to put on and drop the weight as soon as you can for roles that you're working. I mean, obviously Christian Bale's in Le Mans 66 as a side reference, but some of the roles where 1 minute he's bulked up for Batman to be able to wear the suit, and then I think it's the Machinist, I could be wrong with the title.
Yeah, the Machinist.
Absolutely stick thin. There is nothing to him, and
that's the movie where he's supposed to have not slept for a year. Is that right?
Yes. That's right, and it's literally, he looks completely stick thing. So I can understand that, but it also shows as well, I suppose, they're trying to be as accurate as possible, because Formula One drivers aren't big people. So to suddenly see someone the size of Thor trying to get into a car, it's like, no, it's not working. No,
it's
sorry,
not
Chris.
Work, is it?
On the treadmill, mate.
Now, the number 5 Lotus that you saw in the movie, you've seen that in a movie in the last 10 years as well. Where have you seen that movie? Where have you seen that Lotus?
2?
It is Iron Man 2. Yes, it is Iron Man 2. They used the same car for the historic Grand Prix of Monaco in Iron Man 2. That is exactly the same car, and it's owned by Chris Locke, who drove it on both occasions. So there you go. That is Chris Locke's classic Lotus. Well done, Chris. Good job. Although, I have to say, you should have said no to the Iron Man 2 thing. I mean, that was just garbage. That was absolutely awful. The Monaco scene. No. Apparently, Richard Burton, who obviously Susie Miller has an affair with in the movie, he was meant to be on screen. Do you know who was going to play him?
No, but I'm interested.
Russell Crowe. Not kidding.
Really?
Not kidding. Russell Crowe.
No.
That would have been awful, wouldn't it? They stayed away from that. That's a very good idea.
Yeah.
It's a very good idea. You shouldn't have gone there. Shouldn't have gone there at all.
I wouldn't have been surprised if it was just Mika Hakkinen, because there's so many adverts in, like, with the McLaren advert and then the Mercedes advert where he buys them both a Red Bull, where it just keeps on popping up.
That's so true.
It would not surprise me that Hakkinen was not in Rush.
Yeah.
Because he's everywhere.
If you type Mika Hakkinen commercial into YouTube, you'll be there for hours. The guy's just so marketable. Absolutely so marketable.
My favourite of his is that one where it's him and Boris Becker when they're supposed to two old men playing golf.
Oh yes, that is quite cool. That's a very cool advert. There is a very famous cameo in Rush. Did anybody spot it at the end of the 1975 US Grand Prix? Bernie
I think we all will after this.
Bernie Ecclestone.
Ah.
Yeah, Bernie Ecclestone is seen at the finish at the 1975 US Grand Prix. You have to look for him, but he's on the finish line. He is there.
I mean, he's small enough. You probably have to get a microphone, magnifying glass.
He's not the tallest chap in the world, is he? Fair play. But yeah.
I think my favourite video of Bernie Ecclestone is him walking through the rotating doors. Because he goes in one way and then he walks right out the other end of it, like back into the cameras. And it's like, was that him doing it staged to try and be a bit of a laugh, or was he actually just doing that?
Good question. I don't know how many people know of this story, but Daniel Bruhl was interviewed after playing Niki Lauda. And in order to get the characterization right, he actually went and stayed with Niki Lauda. He helicoptered in, landed on the pad, and Niki Lauda shook hands with him and he said, "Let me bring your bag in. Don't unpack." He said, "What?" He said, "Don't unpack." He said, "Why not?" He said, "Because if I don't like you, you're going home tomorrow." That's very Niki Lauda, isn't it? That is very Niki Lauda.
Perfect. That is perfect.
Fact, and to them, absolutely, matter of fact, to the letter. It's like that was totally Niki Lauda's way. Like, yeah, fair enough, that's how I've got to play him. But he actually lived, Daniel Bruhl, he lived in Vienna for a month just to get the Austrian accent right, because there is actually a very distinct difference between the Austrian and German accents. So he managed to live in Vienna and went out every day talking to as many people as possible so that he could get the accent right. Very interesting. There's also a hilarious moment in the filming of Rush with Jochen Maas. Interestingly, a production assistant was allegedly making rounds on the set when they were filming at the Nürburgring in the autumn. And he asked Jochen Maas what his name was. Because obviously he was playing himself in the movie. So he said, your real name, what's your real name? And he's like, no, Jochen Maas. And so he had to go and find somebody who spoke German because he was sure the man didn't understand the question. It's absolutely genuinely true. This genuinely did happen.
I am portraying myself, really?
Yes, I'm playing myself. Yeah, but because he was just saying Jochen Maas, he thought, oh, well, no, there's no way he actually, there's no way he understood. It's also the last on-screen appearance of the late, great Sean Edwards, who actually played his father in the movie. And sadly, later that year, passed away. So it's a wonderful tribute to the world of motorsport, Rush. It's actually, do you know what? It's not the most accurate portrayal of what happened that season. It's not a documentary in any way. It is a movie. It's based on what really happened. But you know what? We love it. We absolutely love it. It gets to the crux of why we love motor racing as well. Rush is one of those films that's going to go down in history forever. And it's very, very hard to think about another movie that's going to beat it. However, have you seen... There is a Formula One movie coming.
Yes.
I do know quite a lot.
Yeah, it's going to be on Netflix. And it's going to star Robert De Niro and John Boyega, as in the very cool stormtrooper turned good guy from Star Wars Episode 7. And this is a fabulous concept. It's actually going to be the first time modern Formula One has been depicted in Hollywood since Bobby Deerfield in 1976. And we all know how brilliant that movie was. So I'm interested now to see how this is going to work. First of all, De Niro. So awesome. Secondly, John Boyega. Also awesome. So surely this can't go wrong. However, Sly Stallone is also awesome. And it really didn't go well the last time he dabbled in motor racing. So I'm a little bit sceptical. I'm a bit dubious. I don't know what you guys think of this. I would love this to work.
I am concerned that we'll see both Boyega and De Niro at the Monaco Grand Prix should it happen again in a socially distanced manner if they ever have people on the grid again. Yeah. Walking up and down with people more interested in them than what's actually happened in qualifying, because they know it's the Monaco Grand Prix. These guys are making a Formula One movie. These guys are about to go around a track for 2 hours and probably not overtake each other much. So let's have a chat with these guys about the Formula One movie they're making. I hope it's not like it's going to be in real life.
I'm surprised they didn't ask Will Smith to be in it, because he clearly knows everything there is to know about Formula One these days.
I think his Lewis Hamilton kidnap thing might have shot him in the foot with that one.
It was quite genius, though. Fair play. Yeah, that was social media gold dust. Fair play.
That was. I think he might have done himself out of a role by that one. I'll be Lewis Hamilton. Look, I'll even kidnap him for you. I'm that desperate. No, sorry, Will.
It was funny.
Sorry, Will.
The premise of it is, in my opinion, it's interesting. It's certainly going to be interesting. Like, the idea, I don't know, like, am I allowed to, is that the next topic, or am I allowed to just, like, sort of dish it out? Like,
you can dish it out if you want to. Yes, we've got some time.
the premise of this, like, Formula One driver turned, obviously has to be used as a getaway driver in like a bank robbery or some form of robbery of some kind, is a really interesting premise. And if they get it right, it could be. So I know, obviously, most likely what it'll be John Boyega driving a Ferrari 458. But imagine if it was like a Red Bull F1 car pulling on some kind of a platform on the back of it or something for them to jump onto, and they just fly away. Like, they can do it really well, or they can do it absolutely terribly.
This is very true. And it's a bit of a toss-up as to which way it's going to go, isn't it? I love the thought, and I want it to work, but I'm so cautious. But then Rush worked, so, you know, who am I to say? You know, Rush was a fantastic Formula One film, and I had no reason to expect it would be sensational, and it was. So I really hope it goes the same way. Any of the topics that have come up to I'm saying that in a very roundabout way. If you've been affected by any of the issues in this podcast, you can write into us. You can send us a message via our social media channels at Downforce Racing. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Do send us messages. We'll read them out each week, and we will let you be a part of the podcast. Don't go away. There is one more topic of conversation. We'll be back after these short messages.
This is the Round the Bend podcast with Jake Sanson.
It's the final part of the first episode of Round the Bend. Good evening, Jake Sanson is with you still with Will Knight, Phil Kinch and Scott Woodwiss. Aston Martin is the first topic of our alphabet cars. Now, this is the way we're going to end every show, with the alphabet cars. Basically, we're going to go through the A to Z of great car manufacturers. What happens when we get to Z? Well, we go around again. It's my show, my rules. So we've got Aston Martin is where we're starting with the letter A. Brilliant British brand. It is now 108 years old. It just celebrated its 108th birthday. 2 weeks ago to the day, in fact, as we're recording on the 31st of January. It was founded in the 15th of January 1913 by Lionel Martin and Robert Bamford. Yeah, it's not Aston. It should be Robert Aston, shouldn't it? But Lionel Martin and Robert Bamford are the ones who founded Aston Martin. And in fact, the whole name of the company now is Aston Martin Lagonda Global Holdings PLC. Aston Martin, basically. I just called it Aston Martin. It was steered from 1947 by David Brown. Genius. One of the most incredible automotive geniuses of all time. Let us not doubt that one. David Brown Limited basically bought Aston Martin and put it under control of its tractor group. He became Aston Martin's saviour, essentially. Who's seen that fabulous Tim Birkin biopic starring Rowan Atkinson?
Yes,
that is absolutely astonishing. That's on YouTube. Go and find that. So you learn an awful lot about the W.O. Bentley designed engine, which is the one that Tim Birkin was desperately trying to get development for, never got it, and sadly passed away before he saw the amazing work it did. But David Brown is the man who basically took them to Le Mans, and that is where, Scott, Aston Martin really made its name.
Yeah, and they had their success. I think if I'm correct, it was Aston Martin was mostly the 50s, and they sort of interspersed with, you know, Jaguar and Ferrari before you know, going forwards. They kind of made some kind of a comeback in the 1980s when they had I think it was called the AMR1. I think it was the DBR1 or whatever it was called, which was the V8 engined car. There were also the Nimrod Aston Martins as well, which had the kind of the proper Nimrod, the Aston Martin type grill on the front. And then I think in between sort of the Group C attempt and them sort of coming back and doing stuff with the DBR9s, the only other time they did anything at Le Mans was, I think they tried to qualify DB7, or someone tried to qualify DB7 for Le Mans in the early to mid-90s, sort of like 93, 94 time, but it never actually worked. So yeah, their sort of motorsport heritage is quite strong, particularly in sports car racing. But I think there's also some people who always tend to forget that, you know, we talk about Aston Martin coming to Formula One as a team taking over from Racing Point this year, of course now being 2021. But people actually forget that they started actually in Formula One. Actually, they had a first crack at it back in the late 50s.
They did indeed, yeah. They were 1959 to 1960. They ran in Formula One.
I was going to say, can I tell you a fun fact as well? Do you know which driver nearly signed for Aston Martin before going elsewhere?
Oh, go on.
Jim Clark.
No way. Oh, my.
Apparently, he was on the verge of racing for Aston Martin before Colin Chapman made him a better offer, and the rest is history.
Oh, my goodness. That really could have changed the face of motor racing history, couldn't it? Oh, my word. Yeah, that is an interesting one. I mean, nowadays we see Aston Martin very much as James Bond's motor. Which was the first movie that was used for?
It would have been Goldfinger.
It was Goldfinger, yes. The DB5, 1964, Aston Martin. It has held a royal warrant as purveyor of motorcars to the Prince of Wales for over 30 years. In fact, it's nearly 40 years. It has 160 dealerships in 53 countries. It received the Queen's Award for Enterprise in 2003. It's traded at the London Stock Exchange and it's part of the FTSE 250 index. I mean, this thing is just, it's a global brand. We love it, Will. We love Aston Martins. I don't know a single person who doesn't like them.
Well, Aston Martin has been my favourite car brand since I was a kid, that and Jaguar. When you're a kid and you think, oh, what like British car brand do you want? You instantly think Aston Martin. No offense, I didn't even know Lotus existed when I was a kid, to be honest. It was all Aston Martin. Obviously, most recently, the main thing Aston Martin's done, like in my perception of them, is sign this new Formula One team in the Racing Point thing and all that. And I've had so much fun in terms of just sitting down on Forza and designing cars for it, to be honest. Like just taking a look at some liveries. And realistically, I think they are probably, they may not be the most bought brand in the world, and they may not be one of the most like wealthiest brands in the world, but they are certainly one of the most iconic.
Absolutely. Okay, here's a bit of trivia for you. How many times has the Aston Martin DB5 been used in James Bond? How many films?
12, isn't it? 12?
You say 12.
I'm going to go with 11.
11. It's not bad. Scott?
I was going to go with 11 as well.
11. It's only 7. Interestingly, it's only 7.
Oh.
The Aston Martin DB5 was in Goldfinger, Thunderball, GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, Casino Royale, Skyfall, and Spectre. That's it. That's all it's ever been. And I have to say, it's not the only Aston Martin that has been used for a Bond film. It's also been. They've also used a V8 Vantage, which was really quite gorgeous. Anybody know which movie that one was for?
It was one of the Timothy Dalton ones.
Living Daylights.
Living Daylights, yeah. See, he knows his James Bond
Volante to
cars.
begin with. Oh, yes. It's a Volante to begin with, and then they
Yes.
winterize it, which makes it back into a Vantage.
That's so true. He really does know his Bond cars. The V12 Vanquish, which was quite recent, of course. So that one was used for Quantum of Solace, I want to say.
No, the Vanquish was Die Another Day.
Die Another Day. That was the only good thing about that movie. The Vanquish, that was it. And the Aston Martin DBS, of course, that was used in Casino Royale, the new comeback. I have to say, there is something about an Aston Martin in the hands of Daniel Craig in the modern James Bond movies, isn't there? It just sends a shiver down your spine. It really is that iconic now.
Didn't they also have a DB11 as well?
No, so
In one film.
that's the DB10. Now, the DB10 was used for Spectre, and you're going to love me when you get to my part of Aston Martin. Sorry, guys.
Oh, right, okay. Well, we will touch on your part of Aston Martin. Do you know how much the DB5 sold at auction? The one that was used in Goldfinger? 2.6 million quid. 2.6 million quid that car sold. I'm surprised it was that low, actually. Go on, then. Amuse us with your Aston Martin musings, Phil. We're strapping in. We're getting ready.
My Aston Martin knowledge,
yes.
Let's cover off Scott's little detail of the DB11. So the DB11 didn't appear in a Bond film. They were going to use it. However, the car was already in pre-production to go on sale. So to make sure they didn't confuse the situation with the film coming out and then the car not already being produced but not ready to go on sale for another year or two, they created the DB10. So the DB10 is a car specifically built for a James Bond film. You'll never be able to own one unless you buy the models that were used for filming, and that's it. They're not even road legal, unfortunately. Yeah. And in that manner, that follows with the BMW Z8, which was used for The World Is Not Enough. Again, a Bond car built for a film that isn't road legal, that you'll only ever own if you buy the model that was used for filming. For me, Aston Martin is a personal piece of history. I absolutely adore the brand. To be honest, if you were coming to me, Jake, I would have asked the question, what do you all think of straight away when someone says the word Aston Martin? But we've got sort of gone there. Racing, heritage and Bond and everything. So for me, there's a personal touch in the fact that family members, uncles and aunts years ago, have worked at the plant in Newport Pagnell way back when, which was quite fun before I turned up. But the stories I used to get told when looking through the family tree was amazing. But it's also a case of it's been my favourite brand ever. I grew up at a time in the 80s when kids were like Lamborghini, Porsche, Ferrari, and not Aston Martin. That's all I want. Goldfinger sold it for me originally with the DB5. And what made it better later down the line was when Aston Martin really pushed to get themselves back out there again in the early 90s with the DB7, which sort of paved the way for the others and the lessons they learnt from that. But it's the fact of when they went racing again back in 2005, as well as being involved in Die Another Day. So I like Die Another Day. I know you'll shoot me down for this again for the Vanquish. But it's the fact of hearing one of those things, a Vanquish V12, going down the road at full chat is amazing. Then understanding of seeing, DB9s, DBR9s racing at Le Mans, racing in sports car racing, and thinking, my God, that sounds almost just the same as the road car version. It's like, wow. So for me, Aston Martin is just, it's a family tradition every year to watch Le Mans 24 hours. My younger stepson will watch the entire race live, and as soon as anything happens to an Aston Martin, he absolutely laughs. I mean, I don't care. So the fact that we had, after many years in international sports car racing, of Ferrari, Porsche, Ford, all going hammer and tongs, BMW at some stage going hammer and tongs for the likes of international spoils, Aston Martin turns up, and the Brits have got a brand they can get behind since Jaguar in the Group C days, and it's like, wow, this is brilliant. And so suddenly the GT ranks become invaded with Aston Martins. International GT3 racing takes off, and you've got Aston Martins competing around the globe on some of the most iconic tracks around the globe. And it's like, wow, these things just look and sound amazing. So for me, yes, my favourite brands, touch of family history with the brands. And even as we speak now, as we're recording, 2 of them are happily circulating still, with just under 6 hours to go in this year's edition of the Daytona 24 Hours. So it's brilliant to see, one, that they're continuing GT racing, because I've always preferred them to be in GT than Formula One. That doesn't mean I'll ignore them this year. I'll obviously see how they go in Formula One. But 2, the fact that despite Lawrence Stroll coming in and doing what he can to get them set up and get this all moving again, is that even though they've pulled their works effort out of international sports car racing, they're still supporting their customers. And there are still plenty of teams out there this year that are going to run Aston Martins in either GTE or GT3. So as a brand, it still remains powerful to this day because of James Bond, because of its quintessential British, we are Aston Martin, we are British, etc., because of its sports car racing. And I think it's one that's just going to truly go on. As Scott said earlier, if it is up for sale, fair enough, we'll understand why in the coming weeks, I suppose. But it's one of those brands that just keeps going and going and going. And it's brilliant to sort of see, even now, 108 years old. Thank you, David Brown, for what you're able to give us and what we can watch to this day.
Absolutely. I'd like to follow up on that point as well, Phil. You're not going to have to worry about keeping an eye on Aston Martin in F1, because they will be world champions in 2022 or 2023.
Oh, that's a big contention, but I can see where you're coming from.
Racing Point with a minimal budget. Eddie Jordan with a minimal budget. Ignore the Spiker and Midland days and the final days of Jordan. When Jordan first came in, they were always qualifying for Grand Prix. 1999, they mounted a title challenge. 2014 to 2018, they were the underdogs, the ones who were punching the likes of Williams and Ferrari at some points, Nico Hülkenberg and Sergio Perez, with the minimal budget that they had, and the fact that they were only just out of the fact that they had just come out of administration. Belgium 2018, I was there because I was on the start-finish straight that year in Belgium. The best memory I have of that weekend, both Racing Points carrying on when everyone else pulled into the cheers from the crowd were absolutely ecstatic. Racing Point now becoming Aston Martin, they've got that funding. They will be world champions in 2022 or 2023. It's an
interesting one. I like your thinking. I do like your thinking. I'm going to hit you all with some James Bond Aston Martin trivia now. Because there's quite a bit of it. There is actually quite a bit of it. So we all know now that the Aston Martin DB5 has been in 7 James Bond films now, but there is another interesting fact. There are so many other things that the Aston Martin DB5 has been in. It's been in 2 of the James Bond video games, Agent Under Fire and From Russia With Love. It's also been in the Cannonball Run, The Return of the Man from U.N.C.L.E., which ironically starred George Lazenby. So that's interesting. He got to drive it in 2 different types of film. Catch Me If You Can. So that car is in Catch Me If You Can. It's also in The Life and Death of Peter Sellers, Charlie's Angels, Full Throttle. I'm fairly sure the DB5 is also in one of the Austin Powers movies, if I'm right in thinking so. So it wouldn't surprise me. It's such an iconic car, such an iconic brand. Yes. Here's an interesting piece of trivia. Who is the only James Bond that never got to drive an Aston Martin on screen?
Roger Moore?
It is Roger Moore, yes. Roger Moore is the only one. Roger Moore is the only Bond that didn't get to drive an Aston Martin on screen, because obviously Sean Connery got to drive the Aston Martin DB5 twice, Goldfinger and Thunderball. Even George Lazenby, in his one movie on Her Majesty's Secret Service, he got to drive the DBS. Then, of course, you've got Timothy Dalton, the Vantage Volante in The Living Daylights. I'm fairly sure that Pierce Brosnan got to drive an Aston Martin in every single one of his 4 movies.
He had one in that Ice Palace, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Aston Martin going.
Brosnan's first 3 films had BMWs, because BMW said when Bond was being brought back in 95 with GoldenEye.
No, wait, although the beginning of GoldenEye, when he's up against that woman in Ferrari, he is driving an Aston Martin.
He is driving an Aston Martin, yes. So he did get to drive the DB5 in GoldenEye. Also, the Aston Martin DB5 is so iconic that it actually broke onto the set of the other 2 Pierce Brosnan James Bond films that did not feature him driving one. So in Tomorrow Never Dies, it's parked in front of Oxford University when he's travelling to the Ministry of Defence. And in The World Is Not Enough, it's parked at the funeral of Sir Robert King. So the Aston Martin DB5 is in all of his movies.
The DB5 was also in Grand Theft Auto 5 for a cameo mission.
It was in Grand Theft Auto 5.
The JB700, I think it was called.
But I absolutely adore the fact that, Roger Moore is the only James Bond that didn't get to drive an Aston Martin DB5. However, he did get to drive one in the Cannonball Run.
And in the Persuaders as well.
So he did get to drive the Aston Martin DB5, just not as James Bond. That's another great trivia fact. That's a pub quiz question. To the pub.
Oh, yes.
How many Aston Martins are going to be in No Time to Die? It's a new record.
5.
It is 5, yes.
Yep.
5 of them will be in the new James Bond film. It is the record for Aston Martins in a James Bond film. It will be the DBS.
That's if it ever comes out.
If it ever comes out. Yeah. The DBS, the Superleggera, the DB5, the Valhalla, and the V8 Vantage. They will all be in the movie. What is Aston Martin's first ever appearance in James Bond, chronologically?
Casino Royale, isn't it? Because the Craig movies are set before... No?
It's an interesting one. Now, it turns out that James Bond was always meant to have an Aston Martin. And I'm going to tell you how we know this, because the Bamford and Martin 1.5 litre side valve short chassis Tourer, which is before it was called Aston Martin, was actually James Bond's first car. Now, he inherited it around Easter 1933 in the first of the Young Bond novels, which is called Silverfin. Got it from his uncle Max. At the age of 13, he drove it despite being underage, and he stored it in a nearby garage while he attended Eton. The car was actually destroyed in the third novel, which is called Double or Die, and he then had to replace it by purchasing a Bentley Mark IV.
I've actually got Silverfin in my hand right now, because I just noticed it on my bookshelf.
There you go. So yeah, the very first car he owned was a Bamford and Martin 1.5 litre side valve short chassis Tourer that he inherited from his uncle Max. So he was always meant to have an Aston Martin. Always. You can give him any car you want. You can give him an Audi. You can give him a BMW. You can give him a Vaz. You can even give him a Citroen 2CV. But that man was always meant to have an Aston Martin. Always. Always James Bond.
And not just an Aston Martin, one specifically modified by Q Branch to use in the field.
Now, another interesting Aston Martin fact. Do you know that there was only ever one Aston Martin mentioned in the original novels? Only one. And do you know which one it was? Go on, this is you, Phil Kinch. This is your moment to shine. Which of the Aston Martins is the only one mentioned in the James Bond novels?
You know, it's weird, because I was reading something about this the other day. It's really weird how these things come up. I believe it's the DB3.
It is, yeah. You are a proper nerd. Yeah, it's the DB Mark III. He actually drove it in Goldfinger. It's a DB3 that was specifically for racing, so it's very unlikely that James Bond would actually have ever driven one, but it is mentioned in the novel. It's also, another bit of trivia, the only gadget-laden vehicle to be mentioned in the original Bond novels. There you go. The only one with Q-style gadgets. and it had a switch to alter the colour of the front and rear lights. It had reinforced steel bumpers, and it had a Colt 45 pistol in a trick compartment under the driver's seat. Oh, it also had a homing device, which was similar to the DB5 in Goldfinger. That's about it.
Nice.
That's about it. So that's all the gadgets he ever actually had in the books. So the movies have completely given him so much more toys to play with. So it's awesome. But yeah, so James Bond was always meant to drive an Aston Martin, and he always should. What else can we tell you about Aston Martins? Other than the fact that so many brands have tried to link up with them. There has been a Lego Aston Martin DB5 recently, which is one of the fastest selling Lego sets in history. What else can we tell you? They failed to do Aston Martin with their own race car very recently, to be fair, but that was, let's be fair, Scott, it was not their best effort. It was not their finest hour, and it certainly wasn't a coloured in glory Aston Martin moment, was it?
Are you referring to the failed, was it the AM1?
Yes, I am referring to the AM1.
AMR1.
I mean, that car looked magnificent, but it just wasn't pure Aston Martin. It just wasn't. However, interestingly,
I think if I'm correct, that chassis then did live on. It just to become something else going forwards.
Yes, it did. Yes. Now that's worth a bit of a conversation. Anyone know what that Aston Martin AMR1 became?
I want to say it became a Pescarolo in some form.
Yeah,
it did. Yes, but then it became something completely different. Very famous race car.
Is it a Bicollis?
It's not a Bicollis. One of the AMR1 chassis did sell to Pescarolo. They developed the Pescarolo 03 for it, but there was the other one that got sold to Delta Wing.
Oh, really?
AMR1. Yes, indeed.
Wow.
The Delta Wing project came out of an AMR1 chassis. So there you go. One of the most coolest racing cars in history came out of the AMR1 chassis. That's not bad going.
Brilliant.
It's not bad going.
That is brilliant.
And I do love the Delta Wing. If you have never heard of the Delta Wing, folks, go and look it up. It's one of the coolest cars in history. It tried to conquer Le Mans several times, actually, in several different guises. It was originally touted as a design for an Indy car, of all things. It didn't quite make the cut. But they then transformed it into a coupe, which raced at the 12 Hours of Sebring in 2013. It then, before then it was at Le Mans, under the guise of Nissan. It was basically the first time they had ever run a car like that at 2012. In 2013, they took it back to Le Mans, I think. Or was it the year after they took it back? They certainly ran it...
No, I think they only ever took it once.
Okay, well, what they did do is they transformed it into the Nissan Zaode RC, which essentially came out at the Frankfurt Motor Show in 2013, and then they ran it at the 2014 24 Hours. It was the only time it ever raced. It didn't race in anything else anywhere in the world ever. And that car had to retire in about 3 hours in due to a gearbox failure. It managed to reach a speed of 300 kilometers an hour, and it did complete a lap at Le Mans using only electric power, which was the whole purpose of the car. Interestingly, the Delta Wing Consortium opened a lawsuit on the Nissan project and Ben Bowlby, and it was for damages and injunctive relief arising out of theft of confidential and proprietary information. It was settled out of court for confidential terms in March 2016, but that is a fascinating story. So that all came out of an Aston Martin. So yet again, Aston Martin strikes again, ladies and gentlemen. They are so amazing. I think we've come to the end of an amazing Around the Bend debut. The Round the Bend podcast episode 1 is now at a close. A massive thank you to my guests, to Phil Kinch, to Scott Woodwiss, to Will Knight. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. On the second episode, we will talk about the Andros Trophy. We will talk about BMW. And we will talk about the movie The Love Bug, hence why the episode of the title is going to be a lot of nuts and bolts. You'll hear that on February the 10th, 2021. Thank you very much indeed for listening. I'm Jake Sanson. I've been driving you round the bend. Good night.
This is the Round the Bend podcast with Jake Sanson.